At the start of the 1900s, Russia was ruled by Tsar Nicholas II, the last emperor of the Romanov family. The Romanovs had been in charge for over 300 years, with the Tsar having total power. No one could question him. Russia at this time was a land of huge differences. The rich lived in luxury, while most Russians were very poor. Farmers, who made up most of the population, barely had enough to eat. Factory workers in the growing cities had terrible jobs and low pay. People were angry because of the hard times and because they weren't allowed to speak up. The Tsar's secret police, the Okhrana, made sure anyone who disagreed with the Tsar was silenced. Groups who wanted democracy or socialism were stopped. The problems of inequality led to revolution. Russia's loss in the Russo-Japanese War of 1905 showed how weak the Tsar was and made people even angrier. The Tsar's choice to join World War I in 1914 was a huge mistake. The war hurt Russia's already weak economy. There wasn't enough food, and prices went way up. Millions of Russian men were sent to fight without proper supplies or good leaders. The war made everything worse, and Russia was close to falling apart. In February 1917, strikes and protests started in Petrograd, Russia's capital. It started because there wasn't enough bread, a very important food in Russia. But the protests quickly turned into a big revolution. Workers, soldiers, and students went into the streets. They wanted the war to end, better lives, and a new government. The Tsar lost his power when his own soldiers refused to shoot the protesters. With no one on his side, Nicholas II gave up being Tsar on March 2, 1917. This ended the Romanov family's rule in centuries of Tsars. After the Tsar left, a temporary government was created with liberal and moderate socialist leaders. This provisional government had a tough job: fix the economy, bring peace, and keep things under control. But the government was stuck between two groups. On one side were the rich people who wanted things to go back to how they were. On the other side were the people who wanted big changes. The government's choice to stay in World War I was very unpopular. The war continued to use up resources and men, making people even angrier. During all the trouble in 1917, a radical socialist group called the Bolsheviks, led by Vladimir Lenin, became powerful. Lenin, a strong revolutionary leader, returned from exile with one goal: to take control and create a socialist country. The Bolsheviks used the weak government and the people's anger to their advantage. They promised peace, land, and bread, something that appealed to the tired soldiers, poor farmers, and city workers. On October 25, 1917, November 7th on some calendars, the Bolsheviks, with the help of armed workers and soldiers, took over important government buildings in Petrograd. The provisional government, unprepared and with no support, was easily defeated. This October Revolution began Bolshevik rule in Russia. The Bolsheviks taking charge started a terrible civil war in Russia that lasted 3 years. The Red Army, fighting for the Bolsheviks, fought against the White Army, a group of people who wanted the Tsar back, along with some foreign countries. The Russian Civil War was a complicated and violent conflict. Millions of people died, and the country suffered from hunger and disease. The Bolsheviks, even though they were outnumbered, were fierce fighters. They took over businesses and farms to feed the Red Army. By 1922, the Red Army won, defeating the White Army and giving the Bolsheviks control of Russia. After the Civil War, Lenin and the Bolsheviks started to build a new socialist country. In 1922, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, or USSR, a huge country with many different ethnic groups, was created. The USSR was made up of different republics, with Russia being the biggest and most powerful. The Bolsheviks made big changes, taking control of businesses, combining farms, and creating a planned economy. The Russian Revolution shocked the world. It gave hope to socialist groups and worried capitalist countries about communist revolutions. The Bolsheviks' idea of a worldwide revolution appealed to workers and thinkers who didn't like capitalism and colonialism. The revolution also changed how countries interacted with each other. The USSR, a new socialist country, became an important world power and challenged the way things were. The rise of the Soviet Union shaped the 1900s, leading to the Cold War and a global fight between communism and capitalism. The Russian Revolution is still one of the most important and talked about events of the 20th century. It was a time of huge change, where the old ways were destroyed and new ones, full of both hope and danger, were created. What the revolution means is complicated. Some see it as a push for a fairer society. Others see it as the start of a controlling government that took away people's freedom. The Russian Revolution shows us how powerful revolutions can be, how appealing the idea of a perfect world is, and how much radical change can cost.